I'm very happy to be able to present this draft agreement to you, which has just been circulated to every one of you. It contains 168 articles. It's a full draft withdrawal agreement. But I'd like to make 3 comments before I move on to substance. First of all, if we wish to make a success of these negotiations, and I certainly do, we must pick up the pace. On the 30th of March 2019, in 13 months, the United Kingdom will no longer be a member state of the European Union. That is what they wanted. And on that day, for that day, we need to have organised its withdrawal in an orderly fashion. So I think now what we need to do is negotiate on the basis of a text, because time is short between today and the autumn of this year, which is when we need to conclude a final agreement based on this draft withdrawal agreement. Because, as I always say, we need to allow a certain number of months for ratification. On the European side, the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament, of course, but also by the British Parliament. So that is why our choice is to work with and propose to the United Kingdom that we work with a legal text which brings clarity. A second point, this is a draft. And as of this afternoon, we will discuss this with the 27 member states in close contact with the European Parliament. But it is a draft, and we will only officially place it on the negotiating table with the United Kingdom once this work with the 27 member states and the European Parliament has been concluded. Now, I have been committed to transparency throughout the entire negotiating process, and that is why we have just published this draft. That will enable everyone to take stock of the subjects on which we need to reach an agreement with the United Kingdom, but I believe that this transparency is also a very important tool in the public debate on Brexit throughout Europe. As of now, thanks to this text, this is a tool based on legal principles, facts, and solutions which are concrete and realistic. And I hope that this document will also be of use for your work, ladies and gentlemen, journalists. And then a third point, this draft text contains no surprise for our British partners. It expresses in legal terms the commitments jointly entered into by the Union and the United Kingdom in December in the joint report. It includes the positions of the Union which were already known on other withdrawal issues on which we haven't really been able to make any progress since December. It includes the Union position on the governance of the withdrawal agreement, and finally it includes the Union position on the transition, which is part of the withdrawal agreement, because, I repeat, the only possible legal basis for transition is Article 50.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to develop briefly each of these 3 points. First, our draft translates into a legal text our joint commitments. Nothing in here will be a surprise for those who have followed the negotiations. The draft text ensures that 1. Citizens' rights, our priority, will be protected as we had agreed, and will be vigilant on the need to keep administrative procedures simple and affordable. 2. All financial commitments undertaken at 28 will be respected by the UK and by the EU. 3, North-South cooperation on the island of Ireland will be protected and a hard border will be avoided. A few words on Ireland. Our text contains the legal commitments necessary for the protection of the rights of individuals as well as for the protection of the common travel area. These points have been already agreed between the EU and the UK. The withdrawal agreement must also contain a solution to avoid a hard border and to protect the Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. This is a joint commitment by the UK and the EU. The joint report lists in paragraph 49 3 options for tackling the problem. First, to deal with this through the agreement of the future relationship, if possible. Obviously, this solution will not be in place at the moment of the withdrawal. Second, the UK committed to proposing specific solutions to address the unique circumstances on the island of Ireland. We look forward to receiving these proposals. Third, to maintain full alignment with those rules of the internal market and the customs union, which now or in the future support North-South cooperation, the all-island economy and the protection of the Good Friday Agreement. This is the backstop solution that we have to put in the withdrawal agreement. It is the only way to guarantee that our joint commitments will be upheld in all circumstances as the joint report requires. Ladies and gentlemen, we have applied imagination and creativity to find a specific solution to the unique challenge that Brexit poses for the protection of the Good Friday Agreement. 2 issues are key to avoid border checks. First, full alignment with the Union law on goods, veterinary and plant health rules. Second, a Northern Ireland has to be covered by the Union Customs Code. Our approach is focused on those areas where it is needed to avoid border checks. Daily life around the border should continue as today. And as I have said before, already today Northern Ireland has rules in place that are different from the rest of the UK. Let me repeat what I said in my last press conference. We stand by our commitment to discuss all 3 options set out in the joint report in parallel. All these issues all of these issues on behalf of the 27, I will continue the dialogue with the political leaders of Northern Ireland. I will meet Michel O'Neill and Arlene Foster early next week. Mon deuxième point.
Then my second point on the draft agreement, after the question of Ireland, our text also includes our proposals on the other separation issues. Again, there is no surprise, because we have translated in legal terms the Union positions as expressed in our essential principles papers with which you're familiar. On several of these subjects, negotiations have effectively begun without our yet having reached an agreement at the moment I speak to you. That's the case with Euratom, a very important subject, or for the question of goods placed on the market, and there are others. On other issues for an orderly withdrawal, like intellectual property or public procurement, we have not yet received a proposal for a British position. And so on those points, the negotiations have not been able to start. So on those subjects, in the draft treaty which you have in your hands, we have indicated the European Union positions. We also hope to make progress on the governance of the withdrawal agreement, which is a key issue. There too, our position has not changed. We believe that the Court of Justice of the European Union must play a role for the interpretation and implementation of the withdrawal agreement whenever that agreement refers to European law. That is the position that we have put into our draft text, with, of course, specific provisions already established in the joint report for the protection of citizens. On all of these important subjects, we hope that our draft text will make it possible for us to make progress more rapidly and speed up negotiations. We have agreed with the British side that we will meet for the whole of next week for a new negotiating round. And then a third point, I would recall that our draft text obviously includes our proposal for the transition period, which has been officially requested by Theresa May on behalf of the British government, and on which the heads of state or government and the European Parliament have given an agreement of principle. Now, on transition, our technical discussions this week have, to be quite honest, confirmed that there are significant divergences, too many divergences on several points, of which I'll mention just two. Citizens' rights, our priority. The United Kingdom still wishes to give different treatment, less favourable treatment, at the end of the transition period to those citizens who arrived in the UK who arrived during the transition, as opposed to those who arrived before the transition, before the day of withdrawal in March 2019. For us, for the Member States, for the Parliament, this remains a major issue, because as far as we are concerned, the full Union acquis will apply throughout the transition. And it seems reasonable that we should treat citizens arriving before or during in a fair and equal fashion. I also believe that with our proposal, that should allow the United Kingdom to have a system which would be easier to manage in purely administrative terms. Then a second big point of divergence for the transition is the application of European rules during this short period from March 2019 to the 31st of December 2020. The United Kingdom still asks to be able to oppose a new European rule with which it disagrees and which would enter into force during the transition. We recalled, I repeat, that the rules must be the same for all during that period. We cannot take any risk of regulatory divergence during the transition. So given these problems, these disagreements, I've quoted two, but there are others, I would simply repeat that at this moment, as I speak to you, the transition is not a given. And that is why I think the next round of negotiations is both useful and important. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be now discussing these matters in detail with the Member States already this afternoon in co-repair. Yesterday, I had the opportunity of addressing the ministers at the General Affairs Council, and also members of the Parliament Brexit Steering Group yesterday evening. Obviously, these discussions must take place with all of the institutions before we officially transmit this document as a draft for negotiations with the United Kingdom. In that way, my hope is that thanks to this document and thanks to the negotiations, we continue to make progress as I wish, towards an orderly withdrawal from the UK from the European Union. Thank you for your attention. I'll be very happy to answer any further questions.
I can see already a lot of hands raised. Maybe we could begin with Bruno, then James, and after that we've got Katia, and then I'll take the others afterwards. So if you could just be patient.
Bruno.
I'm interested, as I'm sure a lot of us are, in the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, the backstop. What I don't understand, it's a conceptual difficulty I have, is that protocol effectively changes the territorial status of the United Kingdom if it was to be enacted or to enter into force. And it's pretty clear for the British government, and probably for any other government, that changing territorial status in that way would be unacceptable, it would be a red line. So how would that backstop protocol ever enter into force? If the withdrawal talks fall, if they fail over this issue, then that backstop protocol is just a worthless piece of paper. You can't make it happen by fiat. So what's the point of having a backstop protocol that isn't going to happen because it would change Britain's territorial order?
Bruno, je comprends pas.
Bruno, I'm not sure I understand your question, but I will try to answer nonetheless. There are three options, and all three are important. In famous paragraph 49 of the joint report, the future relationship, which we don't know, and which will be translated into a treaty much later on when we have agreement on our economic relationship with the UK, without mentioning the other relationships, defence, internal security and so on. This solution we will not have at the point in time when we sign the withdrawal agreement, but we would imagine that, generally speaking, it would offer a solution to the fundamental question in Ireland, namely that we preserve the Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions and the lack of a hard border. The second option is that of specific solutions which the UK has said it would come forward with. Now, on both those options, which I'm prepared to discuss as of now, as soon as the UK has provided the elements to us, we are waiting, and I hope that at the next meeting we'll make headway on that. But our responsibility vis-à-vis all the citizens concerned in Northern Ireland, in Ireland, with the maintaining of the Good Friday Agreement with businesses, at the time of the signing of the withdrawal agreement, we need to have an operational solution. And I'm sure you can imagine, I have been keeping a very close personal eye on this. I am listening a lot. I have a lot of respect for this. And our responsibility, my responsibility as chief negotiator, is to ensure that we have a proposal for a withdrawal agreement that is functional and operational. And therefore on that option, which is one of the three, we, on the EU side, we have the possibility of proposing solutions. And I have done this in a pragmatic, practical fashion, legal fashion, with our full team and all the in-house competence skills that we have. So once again, we are prepared to examine the other options as soon as they are proposed by the UK to us. But my personal opinion, as you've asked me on this backstop that we're proposing will not call into question the constitutional or institutional order of the UK. We will respect that. We're just simply saying that on the territory of the island with two countries, we need to find the capacity for certain subjects for certain issues relating to the internal market or the customs union, which we need to ensure that the Good Friday Agreement can function. We need to ensure that there is regulatory consistency, alignment. I give you an example, maybe I could give you another, something that I'm fairly familiar with, namely animal health and protection against animal diseases. That's something that's very important for farmers and for consumers. Sure, you would agree. We're talking about a geographical area, an island. You can't have two different systems for managing animal health or for protecting against animal diseases. That's just not possible. So we need to have that regulatory coherence, consistency, which is why, as I said, we have focused on those subjects, in particular goods and rules, plant health and animal protection. Those points which clearly affect the good functioning of the Good Friday Agreement.
Of this negotiation, ladies and gentlemen, let me just stress the point that my attitude is and will always be keep calm and be pragmatic.
Okay, James is next, and then I take already note of two further hands. Yes, James, go ahead.
James Chris from the Daily Telegraph. Mr. Barnier, you understand the... I'm over here, sir. You understand the political landscape in Northern Ireland and Britain, and you know that the DUP are firmly against the backstop unless there are no regulatory barriers or a border between Northern Ireland and mainland Britain. That appears impossible unless Britain stays in a customs union. Are you trying to force Mrs May into saying she will stay in a customs union and saying as much on Friday in her speech? Or are you trying to create a border between Northern Ireland and the UK mainland? And aren't you risking toppling her government by meddling in the constitutional affairs of the UK in this manner? Thank you.
Bon, je connais l'ordre.
I know the institutional or constitutional order of the UK, and we all have to respect that. And it is in respecting that order and without interfering in the mixing the internal discussions that are happening in the UK. We're trying in practical, pragmatic terms, in accordance with the law and on the basis of the technical tools we have, we're trying to find solutions. I have listened, I continue to listen, I'll keep repeating this. I am trying to take a calm and pragmatic approach to this subject like everybody else, but we have to have a text agreed with the UK government. And I'm just trying, on the basis of paragraph 49, which we have agreed with the UK government, I'm trying to use that as a basis to find solutions, which is what the Irish citizens want and the citizens of Northern Ireland too. And I did say, with the spirit within which we're working, I will also work with the politicians in Northern Ireland, and we have meetings organised next week. So I respect the British institutional order. I am taking note of what was written by the UK itself in that joint report, and I am committed to working on these three solutions, these three options. I committed to that, and one depends more on us because that is something which relates to the two big realities of the European Union, namely the single market and the customs union. So we have these two European realities which we're responsible for. We have to be accountable there. We are trying to find practical, simple solutions in order to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland, and we want to preserve the cooperation between the North and South. It's as simple as that. And we are prepared to discuss that with all those concerned, those who wish, including the British side.
Mr. Barnier, I want to ask that question again in a slightly different form. Do you not accept... Pardon. Paddy Smith, Irish Times. Do you not accept that it is inevitable, if the backstop measure is approved, that a border will have to emerge on the Irish Sea, whether between the Irish Republic and the UK mainland or between Northern Ireland and the UK mainland?
Non.
No, I would not talk of a frontier with various modern technological means that we work with, and this could be part of the second option where we're awaiting proposals from the British side. If the backstop had to be used, and there's no certainty of that, I mean, we've offered it so that we can come up with a proposed solution, so we're putting it forward. I would hope that perhaps within the first option, the future relationship, will be able to find a solution which is effective for Europe, but if not, we have this backstop which is available and usable. You know, somewhere in ports and airports there will be controls, but I would not refer to a border.
Mr. Barnier, you said that your motto is to keep calm and keep negotiating, but you must remember what happened back in December when the whole divorce agreement nearly fell through over the issue of Northern Ireland. You must also be aware of the potentially explosive effect in the UK of this Northern Ireland protocol. Is this perhaps intentional on your part, because you say you're frustrated with the UK that the negotiations are going so slowly? Do you want to shock the UK into action, or what is your thought?
Non, mais je suis pas.
I am familiar with the British political situation. I respect that political situation. We're not here to give lessons to anybody. We have complicated political situations in the 28 member states of the European Union. I'm not trying to provoke. I'm not trying to create any shockwaves. I want these negotiations to be a success. But it is my responsibility to recall that it is the UK which decided unilaterally to leave the EU on the basis of the outcome of a referendum. And the UK unilaterally, through a letter from Theresa May, initiated these negotiations in March. The UK established a date for leaving the Union 2 years after that letter. And we're 13 months off that date. 13 months. I'm not trying to provoke anybody here. And contrary to what I read, there's no arrogance here. I'm not being arrogant in any way. I have immense respect for the UK, for its history, its culture, for its leaders, for its citizens. And I've said since the very outset that I regret, personally, I regret this decision to leave the EU. But I have been given this task by President Juncker, by the 27 governments, by the Parliament. I have been asked to lead these negotiations and ensure their success. And I said on the very first day here in this very room that nobody should underestimate the human, social, legal, economic, financial consequences of these negotiations. We've got 43 years of integration and relations between the UK and the EU that have to be unravelled here, and we have to go through texts. This is a matter that has to be settled with texts. We've got more than 700 international agreements which the UK will be leaving on the 30th of March because they wanted that. They wanted that in leaving the EU, and which will have to then be renegotiated independently between the UK and all these third countries. We're at a point in time where we have to work on texts. We have to organise this orderly withdrawal with an international agreement between the UK and the European Union. We're not talking about speeches, fine words, or declarations. We're talking about a treaty, an international agreement, one that is legally valid, that's serious. And we're here, and I want to make this Please, I want you to understand this. We simply want to succeed, and that is why, together with my team, that's done that remarkable job, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them. The whole Commission has done a remarkable job in proposing this text. I think that this text, as I am presenting this 13 months from the effective departure of the UK from the European Union, this is an important element to guarantee the success of these negotiations.
Get to all of you, but I ask you for your patience because there are many, many hands. I'll try to keep the order. Catherine is next on my list.
Catherine Fiore, EU reporter. Michel Barnier, you said without a withdrawal agreement there can be no transitional agreement. If the Northern Ireland issue proves intractable, do you think in your discussions with the EU27 that they are willing to stick to this very strict approach where there will be no transitional deal? Or are we beginning to see cracks between members of the EU, of the EU27 countries? Thank you.
Well, frankly, I can't see what you're referring to. I was in the General Affairs Council yesterday with the 27 ministers, and I received the unanimous support of all the governments on all of the subjects. It's important not to get this wrong. There may be some people who haven't understood or make out that they haven't understood what we're working on here. This negotiation is extraordinary, and I hope that that will continue to be the case. Obviously, I'm working here with all of the expertise of the Commission as a negotiator. I mean, all of this work here is something that only the Commission could have done, and which the Commission has done. And it is a tool for the benefit, for the service of the Member States and the European Parliament. But from day one onwards, I've had a mandate from the European Council. So don't get this wrong. Don't start imagining that there are going to be divergences between the members of the Union and the negotiator. That won't happen. Obviously, there are discussions, there are different issues, different sensitivities, different relationships with the United Kingdom. But I take all of that into account. That is my job. But there will never be a difference between the negotiator and the Member States because I am their negotiator. So I cannot see any disagreement here. The 27 have expressed solidarity. The 26 have expressed solidarity with the government of Dublin, on whose behalf I'm negotiating.
Lawrence Norman of the Wall Street Journal. 2 questions, please. Mr. Barnier, I'm over here. First of all, what is the timeline for agreeing the language on Ireland? Are you happy to be negotiating this between now and October, or will progress in the talks on the future relationship stall if the UK does not quickly agree to your language here on Ireland? And second question, you talked many, many times about the lack of clarity from the UK. What do you hope to hear, and what do you need to hear from Theresa May in her speech tomorrow?
The timeline for this question, as with the other questions relating to the orderly withdrawal, is this autumn. I can't say exactly what date, October, start of October, end of October, beginning of November, but the autumn. We have to maybe take an extra couple of weeks, and if we need that, we'll do that. But institutionally speaking, we need that time. And on the UK side, there'll be the institutional time that's required, but also we on our side need the ratification period. This can't happen overnight. You need several weeks in order to do that. So if you deduct that, if you work clock backwards, then I think we need to complete work on all the subjects by the autumn, including the question of Ireland. We need to reach that agreement by then. Now, you said, what is the link with the future relationship? Well, of course there's a link, but I don't know what that is here and now today. All I'm saying is that we're putting in this backstop, and we discussed this with the UK side, as a precaution so that we have a solution in order to preserve the Good Friday Agreement. And if the future relationship offers a better solution, of course we'll replace this backstop, we'll delete this protocol, we'll remove it. It's as simple as that. I am not going to make any comments ahead of that speech by Theresa May on Friday. We will listen to that very closely. I have had the opportunity on several occasions, and I had my slide, as you know, with the steps on it. And you can either go up the ladder or come down it. So I simply explained what the UK red lines were as we had understood, and Theresa May will confirm all of those red lines. And on the basis of that, we, in full respect of the UK red lines, not too much justice, no single trade policy, no budgetary contributions. We want our regulatory independence and no free movement of persons. Those are the red lines that I have heard understood in several major speeches by the British Prime Minister. We respect that position, we've taken note of that, and we've said on the basis of those red lines, these are the different forms of cooperation which are excluded. And it's not me who said this, it was Theresa May who then suggested the possibility of discussing a free trade agreement. And then alongside the free trade, I said we've got an awful lot that has to be done aside from just trade with the UK. We've got specific forms of cooperation that will have to be built up. For instance, ambitious cooperation, I could imagine, in terms of research cooperation with the universities, the academic world, a different form of cooperation than we have today. Then internal security, judicial cooperation, of course. And I said this in Munich 10 days ago, where I listened very closely to the speech by Theresa May. A strategic partnership, what form that should take between the EU and the UK. We'll have also bilateral cooperation between individual member states of the EU and the UK, and that is all on top of what we already have between several member states, the UK and NATO. And this is a matter that interests me in particular alongside other issues, and I've got a lot of ideas and there's a lot that needs to be done. So I do think that we now have to speed things up, complete the negotiations for the orderly withdrawal, so that we can then, as of April, start building up that future partnership, put our energy into that. But there is one thing that is clear, and this was restated on several occasions by the heads of state or government since April last year. Everybody has to understand that there are points which are points of our own EU identity, our economic identity, and the UK is very familiar with that identity because we worked with them for 43 years creating that European identity, and within that integration they had a real influence. I was Commissioner for the Single Market, and there are certain points they know cannot be negotiated. For instance, the integrity of the single market, the 4 fundamental freedoms, the independence of decisions of the 27 remaining member states. Those are points that are not up for negotiation. And in that context, and that's what we are, and we want to remain that, we have our red lines, the UK has its red lines, and it's on the basis of that that we'll build our future partnership. So the sooner we begin, the better it will be, because we will not have a lot of time for all of these negotiations in parallel during the transition.
Au fond, en allemand, si vous permettez.
I'll ask a question in German, if I may. Mr. Barnier, you always say that your British government is your partner when there are misunderstandings from London, but it does seem to me that there's a standard pattern. Mrs. May makes a speech, promises this or that in general terms, then you get a response from the DUP and Arlene Foster, and then you hear from people in the Tory party like the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Rees-Mogg, and gradually moving further and further away from what the Prime Minister has said. And so you end up not really knowing what the Brits want. Now, there's always been this talk about Europe having too many voices, and it would be so much easier if there was just one telephone number you could ring up. Do you feel if you ring the British government, there is one single coherent position which will be able to give a view in response to your draft agreement? Thank you.
La réponse est oui.
Well, my answer is yes.
Odpowiem tak. Jak wszyscy się zorientujemy, co się dzieje w Londynie.
Nous savons tout cela, mais moi je négocie au nom de l'Union avec.
We all know this, but I'm negotiating with London, with the British Prime Minister, who is expressing the formal position of the British government. That is what happened in December. You know how the procedure ran. Of course, there were internal discussions within Theresa May's majority, but Mrs. May, whom I respect, who I'm continue to respect, came on behalf of her agreement to confirm, on behalf of her government, to confirm her agreement with the joint report. And in here, we have many paragraphs which are a direct translation of that joint agreement on citizens' rights and the financial settlement, for example. So we respect the British Prime Minister and we take account of her position. That's all I can say, and I think that will be the case in the weeks ahead. I am just negotiating with the government of the United Kingdom, but that doesn't prevent us from listening to everyone. Mr. Corbyn's been here several times, Mr. Nick Clegg, even Mr. Farage. But I want to hear all of these people because I wish to understand, and I'm trying to understand. But we negotiate with the United Kingdom government and its Prime Minister.
We have Jennifer, we have David, and then we see how far we want to go. Jennifer.
Rankin, The Guardian. Mr. Barnier, you said you hope to find a solution under option A on Ireland, and I wanted to ask you about the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn's idea. He said on Monday he wants a new comprehensive UK-EU customs union that would allow the UK to have a say in negotiations on EU trade deals. Do you see this as a realistic option, that the UK could have a say on EU trade deals? And would that mean for you consultation, or would it mean a veto over the EU's position as a non-EU country?
Je vais peut-être vous décevoir, mais
I may be going to disappoint you. I've met Mr. Corbyn on 3 occasions, and together with his team, those have always been very useful discussions, and I won't comment on the specific proposals from different political parties. As I said, we negotiate with the UK government. The only thing that I can say is that on the customs union, and you had those steps, the penultimate steer or step, this might be an element of the future relationship, but we'll see what the position of the UK government is first. That offers a significant part of the solution for Ireland, and it's a question of regulatory alignment. And that's all we want to say here today with the specific legal proposal on the backstop.
One more question on the left there.
oui, j'en prie.
Allô. Merci. David Carretta, Radio.
Yes, from the Italian radio. I'd like to put two questions, if I may. The first is on the transition. You didn't mention divergence on the length of the transition. Is that at least something on which you agree with the UK, who were querying the specific date proposed by the European Union? Now, you've said that the deadline now is the autumn, give or take a few weeks. So let me reformulate a question put by one of my colleagues. The British aren't managing to put forward proposals. There's no agreement. There's no progress. When will you say to the 27, it's time to prepare for the worst? The priority must be to prepare for a disorderly Brexit. Thank you. From the word go, and I remember very clearly what I said to you in this press room and in other press rooms, we have to be ready for, and we are preparing for, every situation. Work is being done by the Commission Secretariat General, and that clearly will continue. And I would personally like to thank Alexander Italiana for the work that he has done, the work that he was entrusted to carry out by the President of the Commission in order to prepare this contingency planning. That's not my task as a negotiator, but it is work which requires a great deal of precision and consultation, and which is continuing. And I imagine that on the British side there's the same concern to prepare for all possibilities, to prepare the various stakeholders and economic players. I mean, it is our responsibility to do that. But that's not the option that I am working towards. I'm working towards an orderly withdrawal. And once again, objectively, I would repeat, we are on the road to that objective, to that orderly withdrawal, even if it is complicated. And the agreement in December clearly put us on the road to an orderly agreement. It was very precise, 15 pages, 96 paragraphs that you'll find in today's document. That has certainly put us on that path. And I hope that next week and in the weeks ahead we can make progress in order to reach an agreement on the orderly agreement in all its dimensions by the autumn. That is my idea.
For those who still have their hand up, I can give one more hand, and then I'm afraid the rest we will take in our technical briefing straight afterwards. Go ahead, last question.
Who are you pointing at? Mr. Barnier, merci. Mark Stone from Sky News. Back to the Irish question, if I may. One thing I'm still not clear on is that it appears to us that option one, which is the rich free trade agreement between the UK and the EU down the line, has been described by you yesterday, by Mr. Tusk, President Tusk last week, as an illusion. The idea that a rich free trade agreement with three baskets and all that could come about, that is an illusion. Option two is the so-called Narnia option, the idea of technical solutions, and option three is obviously the backstop, as we've discussed. So either it seems that you're bluffing and that you do actually believe that one and two are realistic, even though you're saying they're not, or you're genuinely trying to push the UK down the option three fallback, which is to, as the UK would see it, to annex Northern Ireland. Could you just clarify that for me?
Vous devriez commencer à me connaître.
You should be getting to know me better. I don't bluff anybody. Secondly, I think it would be illusory to imagine that on the EU side we accept cherry picking, because that would be calling into question what we fundamentally are and what we've been since 1957 with the common market and then the single market. And the UK knows who we are because we've been that together for 44 years. They know the rules and the reality of that single market. It's our main asset, if I can put it in those terms. So there will be no cherry picking. And apart from that, I think that the three options are still possible. And I trust the UK, as they committed to, and they signed this document together with us. We will work on option one, which is that we find a solution through the future relationship, an effective solution for Ireland, or we have to offer a specific solutions. And I'll repeat yet again that on our side, because we have to do things seriously, we have responsibility. We have to propose a solution, this backstop solution. That is our responsibility, and that's what we're doing here today. And now we are going to work. We've got a few months to work on these three options as soon as we have all the elements. But we've offered our elements. No more, no less. And maybe just one final question.
Voilà, your turn.
Barnier, thank you. On that, the December agreement had two very specific clauses in it. One said no border on the island of Ireland. The other said no border in the Irish Sea. This withdrawal agreement addresses in great detail avoiding a border on the island of Ireland, but seems to accept that there can be one in the Irish Sea. Why is that?
Because if in a document from the European Union I included this Article 50, you would probably be the first to say that the European Union is intruding into the domestic affairs of the United Kingdom. I mean, be logical. I'm very familiar with that article. It was brought in at the request of the United Kingdom, and it relates to the responsibility of the United Kingdom, its internal organisation, and it's certainly not something that the European Union would interfere with. Anyway, thank you very much. I've been very happy to see you, and please don't forget we have the technical briefing coming up now.
Non, parce qu'il n'y a pas le titre.